Good evening, Who Dat Nation all over the world, and a happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast, and we've decided not to flex our muscle this week. We decided to leave Wednesday on a Wednesday, and with that, we would like to welcome you to Lucky Week 13. He says with a roll of the eyes, as I welcome my friend and co-host Brendan Boylan to the show. Brendan, happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. Isn't that crazy? When's the last time we've been on an actual Wednesday night? So
I had no idea. None.
So it's nice. It's nice to be able just to keep it as scheduled. A lot of it's been my fault and in my travel, but yeah, we're here. And I'm obligated to do this because Katie's been asking for however long we've been engaged. So, hey guys, I'm Brendan, Katie's fiance. Hope you guys are doing great tonight.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, you got to make everybody happy, right?
Well, you know what? You could tell Katie, and I'll let Lauren know. But they have to tune in to watch it. For the remainder of the regular season, we will introduce ourselves as such. Hi, I am Bob Rose, Lauren Rose's husband. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz, and then you can go on with yours.
Only if they watch the rest of the year, yeah.
Only if they watch the rest of the year. The second they don't, then I'm going to start introducing myself as, hi, I'm Bob Rose, and it's complicated.
Oh, ooh. Pulling out like 2011 Facebook right there. It's complicated as an option. Oh, man. Yeah, we're going to have to figure that one out. But, yeah, no, everything's good. It's nice to be here on a Wednesday night. Not so nice to be talking about what's been a really putrid football team going to face a really good football team this week.
Yeah, speaking of complicated.
Yeah, that's complicated. Don't know if Olave is playing or not yet, which we'll talk a little bit about. Mike Thomas obviously on IR. I mean, this is you don't want to say it was the worst of times by any means, but, because there has been worse. But it's not the most fun of times either. And I thought it was only appropriate to title this episode "What's Next for the Saints," because I feel like that is really the biggest question on everybody's minds. So I will say hello to some of the people that have popped in. Jerry, I see you. Hello. John Butler, good to see you. Elite Goods comes in a lot. Good to see you. And Eric, our friend Eric. Yeah, that football's coming to you, my friend. It's up in wherever towards Bob Rose. Somewhere up the East Coast. So it's coming to Bob to get his little signature and note on and then headed out your way. You're in Colorado Springs.
Nice.
Oh, man.
If I had a little bit of extra time, I have family out there that I used to live with when I was a kid. I'd have driven it out there.
That is, that would have been, if we had the extra time. Also, I don't know if you want to be driving through that area of the world.
Hey, good point. You
know what I mean? It's cold. I know the Northeast got some snow. I'm not sure if you guys got any or if it was further north. But
we got a dusting, but it was 14 degrees here as a high last night. So there's that.
Yeah, that's gross. Charlotte was cold. Wasn't that cold, but it was about 20 degrees last night here in Charlotte. But let's talk about New Orleans. Let's talk about the Saints. For you, those of you who tuned in to our post-game show, you guys got to hear a lot of our frustrations with the team following their loss to Atlanta on Sunday. So we don't want to bore you with a whole lot of that. We will definitely discuss the game a little bit. We'll discuss the Saints a little bit, but we don't want to have a big hour-long depressing conversation and show. It might be anyway, because, well, let's just face it, that's where the Saints are right now.
Especially when we kick off with the injury report here in a minute.
I was about to say, let's go ahead and just kick it off with the injury report, and that'll put us in a great mood. So the biggest question is Chris Olave. Bob, the good news with Olave that you had informed me of was he did practice today in a limited basis, but has yet to clear concussion protocol. What is the status with the rest of that injury report?
Yeah, and like you said, Chris Olave is the name to keep an eye on as the week progresses. You don't really expect a final decision on him until Friday to see whether he cleared protocol or not. but it was at least good news to see him out on the field. Rashid Shaheed with that quad injury did not practice. Eric McCoy with a shoulder injury, he went through some light stretches and light workouts at the beginning, but did not participate in drills. Kendre Miller, ankle, still out, did not practice. Michael Thomas, as we know, still on injured reserve for the second consecutive week with that knee injury. Defensively, Cam Jordan, ankle, did not practice. Marcus May, shoulder, did not practice. Pete Werner, oblique injury, shoulder injury, did not practice. And obviously, Marshawn Lattimore, week 2 on injured reserve with his ankle injury. So there's our walking mash unit for the week.
So which one of us is getting the call to play this week, Bob? You or I?
I don't know, man. I think I probably have a couple snaps at wide receiver in me, but the first time I get hit, I'm done. Safety, I still see the field really well. So I'm not sure I can run with anybody, for any more than a couple plays at cornerback, but I might be able to drop back as a deep safety and last maybe a quarter. So there's that. You might get a couple snaps out of me.
I'll give the Saints. They can pencil me in for 3 red zone snaps. We know they'll get there. We also know they won't score with or without me on the field. So there'll be 3 meaningless snaps, but they can pencil me in.
That would equal the same number of meaningless snaps that Jimmy Graham has gotten this year. So there's that.
Jimmy Graham might have less, or I'm sorry, no. Less meaningless snaps because he hasn't been available, or has been available and has not been active, which I think there's a good chance that changes this week. For the simple reason of the amount of receiving injuries that they have. I mean, even if Olave goes, not having Shaheed, you have A.T. Perry, you have Lynn Bowden, who actually played, a little bit last week, played well last week. My guy and Keith Kirkwood, but you could definitely use another receiving threat there. And I think Jimmy Graham fits that mold. I've been saying it all year. I don't want Jimmy to sit there and get 50% of your offensive snaps, but for the love of God, can he at least be in uniform, so when you're sitting there on third down, or you're sitting there in the red zone where you guys just forget what the purpose of being in the red zone is for, that you can look on the sideline and go, you're tall. Go.
Yeah.
We've been begging for it all year.
This team, New Orleans had 6 trips inside the Falcons' 25-yard line last week. They came away with 2 field goals and turned the ball over twice. One of those returned for a touchdown. So, essentially, Atlanta outscored New Orleans in the Falcons' red zone 7-6. That's beyond putrid. This is not the first time we have seen this year. In fact, it's been more often than not. So like you said, even an 8th grade basketball coach would look down his bench and look at number 80 and say, even if he doesn't know who number 80 is, and say, you know what, you're tall and we're being out rebounded. Get in there. To your point, I personally still would be at least a little bit surprised if Chris Olave plays. I do not expect Rashid Shaheed to play. A.T. Perry, Lynn Bowden, Keith Kirkwood. I fully expect an activation from the practice squad to Marquez Callaway. But none of those guys change anything. Jimmy Graham, while he's certainly not a far cry from the Jimmy Graham that we grew to love, in New Orleans between 2010 and 2014. He's not that Jimmy Graham anymore, but he's still 6'7". He can still catch a football. He still knows how to box out, and he still knows how to run routes and make plays in traffic. If you are entertaining any thoughts at all of even staying close with the Detroit Lions, it's got to be all hands on deck. Don't you think, Brendan?
Well, absolutely. And to make matters worse, this is like the national 1:00 game. The majority of the country is getting this game. So do you really want to just crap the bed in front of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of eyes on Sunday? And no, Jimmy Graham's not going to make or break that, right? Marquez Callaway. And everybody's got opinions on Marquez Callaway. And I said this when he was on the team. I said it when he got cut. I said it when he got his first contract in Denver. Was he's a solid, usable fourth receiver for a team.
Yeah.
So I'm happy. Bring him up. He's a guy. He's familiar with the system. He's going to wear his third different number with the team. Yes, I'm a nerd who likes stats like that. Another Saint that wore 3 different numbers in his Saints career, Mark Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
But Callaway wore 12. You wore 1, and you can't take either of those numbers because 1 is Alontae Taylor, 12 is Chris Olave. So he's going to be in a different number if he gets called up. But this is a Saints receiving corps that, and we talked about this at the beginning of the year. Bob and I hate to pat ourselves on the back, right? That's one of our least favorite things to do.
Right.
Please sense our sarcasm. How many times do we talk about when we're going way back to training camp? We're like, wow, the Saints have a lot of receivers in camp. And we had the joke where it was like, oh, that player would be a good last receiver. And you just kept going that through the list, right? We made that joke, but we also said, remember, one injury. We both said, whether it was one injury to Mike Thomas or Chris Olave, and the receiving corps has a completely different feel. Well, God forbid, you got 1 to Mike Thomas, 1 to Chris Olave, and 1 to Rashid Shaheed. And you go from having a pretty good, remember the beginning of the year for the Saints. Those 3 guys were top 25 respectively in receiving yards through the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. You go from that to looking around and you're going, okay, well, if Shaheed and Olave both don't play this week, which, knock on wood, Olave could. Concussions are weird. Concussions are handled differently by everyone. That's what makes it one of the most unique injuries in any sport. A concussion can keep somebody out for a couple days, while it can affect somebody else completely differently, and they're out for multiple weeks. But if those guys are out, you are looking around and going, my number 1 receiver is A.T. Perry, rookie, last day pick, 3rd day pick. And you look around my number 2 receivers, Lynn Bowden, maybe? And then my 3rd receiver, as much as I love the guy, is Keith Kirkwood, who, again, love the guy, but not on this roster to catch a ton of passes.
Right.
Good in the blocking game. Big-bodied guy. Had 2 nice catches last week. But, Keith's not a guy that's going to do that for you. You understand your role. And same with A.T. Perry. A.T. Perry at this point, he's a big targeted guy, big-bodied. Had the touchdown reception against Minnesota, which was awesome. But he's also a day 3 draft pick from a small, and when I say small, not in the size of the school, but in terms of powerhouse in college football, a small ACC school.
And a guy that's only been active for 3 or 4 games too. Remember that. It's not like he has 10 or 11 games of rookie experience here.
Exactly. And then you get Lynn Bowden, who I think had some nice moments last week. But another guy, not a whole lot of NFL games under his belt at this point, and is really there to be the backup return man, emergency return man more than anything. So, and then if you bring up Marquez Callaway, believe it or not, I'd have to look, but I would say Callaway and Kirkwood would be fairly close in NFL games played, because Kirkwood was a guy, he'd be active for a few games, and then practice or be active and be cut. So that's not a lot of experience in terms of your wide receivers if those guys are out, and all of that with a quarterback who has been. I asked this a few weeks ago. Is it fair to say disappointment at this point for Derek Carr? A couple weeks ago, we're like, I don't know if disappointment's the right word. Now it's yes. Yeah, it's been bad. It has been very bad.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that as well. I do want to read some of these comments. John Butler says, "Bring me Traquan. Traquan's available, right?"
I asked Alan Ulrich this last night on Under the Dome because I'm truthfully not sure. I don't know whether I asked hoping that I would get the answer that I wanted. I asked if Traquan Smith was on the Denver Broncos active roster or their practice squad. Yeah, he is. He is available, much to my dismay. So it would not surprise me if on Thursday tomorrow we see report Saints bring back Traquan Smith. It would not shock me one tiny bit.
It would me. We've talked about this with other guys too. I don't think Traquan was a DA guy. I think that was a pure Sean Payton guy, and he's right there. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, I just don't see DA going, If anything, could I see Dennis Allen go, who did we have in camp this year? Brian Edwards, come on down.
There you go.
Like, I could see that more, guy we had in camp, former Raider, than I could going and getting a guy like Traquan, which out of the two of us, I defended Traquan staying in New Orleans a lot more than you did.
Oh, yeah.
But my defense for Traquan was always good run blocker. Not really going to help you out when you need some receptions, especially at this point. Let's see, William Lopez. This is a long one, so give me a second. People like to repeat talking points without any evidence. For example, I have heard many, including some of the media, say Derek Carr has always been terrible in the red zone during his career. If that's the case, please explain to me how he threw 32 touchdowns in 15, 28 and 16, and 27 as recently as 2020. Does that sound like red zone issues in those seasons? I would like to, based off those numbers, I'd like to see how many of those touchdowns came in the red zone.
Yeah, that's the key.
Without diving into that, yeah, you can throw a ton of touchdowns and still be ineffective in the red zone, right? Because if I take those numbers and the worst one you threw out, there was 27 touchdowns in 2020. Again, I'm not hopping on Pro Football Reference or anything while we're here right now. I could, don't really want to. But if I were to sit there and break down how many of those 27 were in the red zone and how many red zone interceptions did they have, what was the red zone touchdown percentage for the Raiders in 2020, that gives us a much better picture than it does just throwing those numbers out. Because frankly, he has not been good in the red zone in his career. And the numbers back that up a little bit, but Bob will be able to speak to this a lot better because of the film he watches and especially during the draft processes and whatnot. Like Derek Carr on film in the red zone is atrocious. And there are certain points in his career where it's so bad, it looks like I handed a controller to a 5-year-old and said, play Madden on all Madden in the red zone. Like it looks that bad. And there's examples from his time in Oakland, his time in Vegas, and now his time in New Orleans where you're just like, what are you doing? You want a prime example? And it's just the most recent example, so bear with me. That interception against Atlanta, right? The Falcons ended up posting a video of a bird-eye view of that. Slow that down, right? And then if you have the ability or there's other angles of that play, if you really want to sit there and drive yourself nuts, look at that angle and then the opposite end zone angle of those cameras and kind of line them up and see how bad that was. How Derek Carr's explanation of that play does not match the play itself. Right? He just, the whole route stares down the receiver. Bates jumps the route because Bates does what any good safety does. He reads the eyes of the quarterback. Now, all Derek Carr had to do was essentially stare down hard enough, get the safety to bite, which he did, and then throw to a wide open Chris Olave in the middle of the field. Maybe not wide open. You still have to, you still got to put some gas on it, but you get it there. You have a good chance of getting a completion. Or do what Drew used to do. And I hate these as much as anybody else, so I'm going to stop myself there. not what Drew used to do. You could say the shoulder fake, which was great when that worked. But any other quarterback, just pump fake it right there or give some sort of like movement, make Bates commit, and then hit Olave. It's all you had to do. It's not this whole like Derek Carr's like, well, you just don't expect the safety to do that. And it's like, but you do. Like, you really do. So yes, Carr has been bad in the red zone. So that's a really good segue to.
Well, wait a minute now. Was it Willie that made that comment? Was that his name? William?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, William, I see your point. I do. And I was a big defender of the Carr signing when they brought him in. I thought he'd make all the difference in the world. But look at something else too when you're throwing out your stats from his time in Oakland. Not only take a look at the deeper throws that Carr converted for a touchdown, but also take a look at the Raiders' red zone percentage. That'll give you a key in too. Just like looking at the Saints this year, the Saints dwell near the bottom of the league in red zone percentage. We just threw out the statistic about the trips inside the red zone, inside the 25-yard line against Atlanta. We know, I think it was against Houston that they were 0 for 5 in the red zone. They were like 1 for 4 or 1 for 5 against Jacksonville. They converted nothing but field goals inside the red zone against Tennessee. They were 0 for against Tampa Bay. We could go on and on and on. But I'll say this too: it's not all Derek Carr's fault. Although, and this is a statistic that Brendan first pointed out on our post-game show on Sunday. The Saints have scored 3 touchdowns in their last 32 possessions. That by itself is awful enough. What's even more disturbing is the fact that Derek Carr was not the quarterback for any of those 3 touchdowns. That's even more disturbing. But again, it's not all Derek Carr's fault. The receivers aren't getting separation. The offensive line isn't blocking, whether it's in pass protection or getting any traction in the run game. They aren't able to run the ball if it's not Taysom Hill. Once they get inside the 15, 12, 10-yard line, you have receivers dropping passes in the end zone. But Derek Carr isn't helping his own case either. Staring down receivers like he did on the Jesse Bates interception. Being off target. And when you're in the red zone, and I say this all the time, things are condensed. Therefore, every tiny mistake and every inch gets magnified. You have your most accurate quarterbacks throughout the NFL, not only this year, but throughout NFL history. Your most accurate quarterbacks are the ones that usually throw for the most touchdown passes. I know that seems like a no-brainer statement, but again, look at my previous statement about every inch gets magnified. You can't be off even a millimeter, oftentimes when you're making a pass inside the red zone. If you are, that pass gets broken up. It might even get intercepted and taken back the other direction. So while I'm not going to 100% vilify Derek Carr for this team's red zone struggles, he is certainly near the top of the many, many, many issues that this team has inside an opponent's 20-yard line.
Absolutely. And not in the red zone per se, but another good example of just missing targets in critical spots was one of the final receptions of the day for Rashid Shaheed. It was a drag route across the middle of the field, essentially clear out, with everybody else, run the drag with your speedster. And it was thrown behind Shaheed. He catches the ball. He's able to kind of stumble forward for a first down. But if you freeze frame it, if the ball's in front of him, you're looking at getting first and goal at the bare minimum with that kind of speed, because that's how far everybody else was. Mm-hmm. If not getting in the end zone, if you get one decent block or make a guy miss.
Mm-hmm. Mahomes makes that play with Tyreek Hill. Tua makes that play with Tyreek Hill. Hurts makes that play with Devonta Smith. Russell Wilson makes that play with Marvin Mims. We could go on and on and on. But again, the league's most accurate quarterbacks make those plays consistently, time and time again. And those are the plays that Derek Carr has missed on. And granted, the statistics actually show a little bit of a lie, because the statistics will show that Derek Carr made a completion, for only went for 4 yards or whatever it was. But the reality is, as you said, Brendan, that play should have went for at least 18 or 20 yards, if not more, because he had Shaheed had the blocking downfield. But it only took an absolutely terrific catch by Shaheed to even get that 4-yard gain.
Exactly. I want to go back to this fun game. Former Saints receivers that the Saints could bring back on Thursday because of injuries. John Butler says Emmanuel Butler.
Well, there you go.
Eric Howard says, please don't bring back Kevin White. That would be funny.
It would.
That was a guy I was really rooting for. Not gonna lie. Was really rooting for him to stay around. Let's answer some of the questions. DJ, another loyal watcher listener, says we'll get these two questions. First is one, I know we're not even going to speculate, so we'll get this one out of the way because we're not going to speculate. If DA is gone next year, who are the coaches bringing in? Not ready to have that conversation yet. I know you guys are. I know people here locally where I live, it's been on local radio all week with the Carolina Panthers. Who are they bringing in? What's going on there? Also, if you guys feel terrible about New Orleans, just be thankful you're not Carolina. Because Carolina is not just a dumpster fire because they don't have their first-round pick this upcoming season. It's not just a dumpster fire because their personnel moves in the offseason were horrendous. It's also a dumpster fire because they have a terrible owner. Not just in the NFL. And I'll just say this for you few people who care about Carolina sports listening or watching. Tepper's been known to have a short temper, LOL, with his coaches, not just in the NFL, but he also owns the soccer team here.
Mm-hmm.
In the first season of the soccer team, while the team was in a playoff position, he fired their head coach midway through the season of the first season while you were in a playoff spot.
So what you're saying is Ted Lasso wouldn't have had a chance there.
And yes, exactly. And Ted Lasso is the savior of everyone. What a great way to bring up a great show. DJ's other question. Interesting, and I've seen it thrown out there because Saints fans and LSU fans go hand in hand. DJ says right now the Saints would be picking somewhere between 10 and 12.
Mm-hmm.
If Jay Daniels is there, would you pick him? The easy answer to this is the following. It doesn't matter what I think the Saints should do at quarterback because they are locked in to a quarterback for the next 3 years for a crap ton of money. Could they move on from Derek Carr? Yes. Will they after 1 year? Absolutely not.
Here's my take on that, and Alan and I discussed it a little bit on Under the Dome last night. Alan correctly brought up that this team has a whole lot of other issues in addition to quarterback. Offensive tackle, especially left tackle. Defensive end, who's going to get the quarterback on the ground, because there's certainly nobody on this roster. Linebacker, safety, maybe tight end, if you don't trust Juwan Johnson. A couple of those positions, not linebacker or tight end, but the other positions that we named, those would absolutely be in play for a first-round draft choice. I threw out quarterback, but only this. And you said it was DJ that asked the question. DJ, those are great questions. The head coach and quarterback. And to me, in my view, they're tied to each other. First of all, there's no guarantee that Dennis Allen is even going to get fired. Let alone before the end of the season. I don't think it'll happen before the end of the season. So the quarterback issue is this. If Dennis Allen is still the coach, somehow, some way, I'm not ruling it out. I don't want it to happen either, but I'm not ruling it out. If Dennis Allen is still the head coach, I got news for you, Who Dat Nation. Derek Carr is still your quarterback. Period. End of story. And Allen felt the same way, for better or for worse. That's just fact. However, if the Saints do move on from DA after the season, and like Brendan said, it doesn't make any point to speculate who it could be until it actually does happen. But if the Saints move on from Dennis Allen, then I fully would expect that the new coach would come in with the demand that he wants to pick his quarterback. Now, I see what you're saying, Brendan, and I agree with you to a point. They are financially tied to Derek Carr for at least one more season. You can restructure the remaining years on that deal, and escape in 2025 with a fairly reasonable salary cap hit. But you're at least stuck with him for one more season. That doesn't mean he has to be your starter, though. And if a new coach coming in, and I know I would feel this way if I was the coach coming in. I'm not even going to consider this job unless I get to have my say in who the quarterback is. And if I don't want Derek Carr as my quarterback, then and only then would a first round draft choice be on the table, whether it's Daniels, picks from Washington, Nix from Oregon, Penix from Washington, May from now. We could speculate. Yeah, again, we have plenty of time to do that. Brendan and I give you, I think, wonderful draft coverage. So at that point, we can start talking quarterback. But is it on the table for the Saints? Absolutely. But it's only on the table if they make a move at head coach. I firmly believe that those two spots, coach and quarterback, are hogtied together for better or for worse going into this offseason.
Right. And I said this kind of a little bit last year before Derek Carr. And I still believe this is I would be really intrigued if the Saints went after like a former first round talent with mobile ability that you get cheap enough to see if it works. Because to me, that's more entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the same way with Jameis, is it is more entertaining to see that than it is what this offense is right now. And I don't know if I have a name. Last year I threw out Malik Willis a couple of times as a guy that knew he was unhappy, had a decent draft grade. Maybe the Saints go see what they want to do. There's a lot of speculation with what Chicago is going to do.
Exactly.
I don't know how cheap you can get Justin Fields, but I'd be intrigued with a guy who at one point was my number one quarterback in his draft class. At this point, I would be. But, we'll see. Oh, William.
In Fields, you'd be talking about a guy you could probably get for an early day 3 pick, or at least a conditional pick, that's still on his rookie deal, that would not cripple your salary cap. So, I'd be down to bring that in, that kind of prospect in. If you think you have the guys on your offensive staff to develop them. And again, right now, the Saints don't.
No, they don't. Well, and then, and we'll get into this too, is potentially later in the year, not tonight, but if the Saints season continues to go south, and you get into the final week or two of the season and you're out of any playoff position, and Kenneth threw it in there right before I said it. Kenneth, you were reading my mind, my friend, is what about Jake Haener? Do you throw Haener out the last game or two of the season just to see what you have? I know this staff really liked him during training camp.
Mm-hmm.
I know the suspension he got was not ideal for the development of Jake Haener, but I know this is a staff that really liked him and liked the potential, and obviously used a 4th round draft pick on him.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be something, like I said, we can dig a little more into as the year goes on, because frankly, we don't really know what Jake Haener is either. I want to go back. William threw this out here, and so I want to go back. He dug deep. He said he has to double down. He dug deep on the Pro Football Focus, which is not one of Bob's favorite sites in the world, but let's hear him out. According to PFF, Carr was one of the league's highest-rated red zone quarterbacks in November 2022. In fact, he was the highest-rated quarterback in that area of the field. His passer rating to that point of the season in 2022 was 106, and he had thrown 15 touchdowns to no interceptions in the red zone. That was November of 2020. So
2020, you said?
2020, a few years ago.
correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't Gruden the head coach of the Raiders at that point?
Yes, that was
Okay.
prior to all the stuff. We'll just say stuff that came
Okay,
out.
yeah. With Gruden, it's just stuff. And thank you for that stat, William. And I am not surprised to hear that, and I'm not surprised to hear when it happened, because it's no secret that Derek Carr's best football statistically came while John Gruden was his head coach. And again, I will circle back to what I said about the Saints and it not being all Derek Carr's fault because of Pete Carmichael, lack of offensive line, lack of receiver separation, just lack of overall execution by Carr and everyone else on that unit. John Gruden is one of the finer offensive minds, maybe in pro football history, but certainly in recent NFL lore. So I'm not surprised to hear that whatsoever. But we also know that Carr tailed off badly after not just after Gruden was let go, but especially once they brought Josh McDouchebag in to coach the Raiders. So again, coaching matters, folks. And I don't have to tell this to the DA haters and to the Pete Carmichael haters. I'm saying it to everyone. I know people want to vilify Derek Carr, and believe me, I'm down on him too right now. But I believed Derek Carr was going to be the right man because I thought that this was going to be a different offense in general. We haven't seen either. We haven't seen Derek Carr be the man, be the player that we thought that he was going to be, but we also haven't seen this offense. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, et cetera. You guys know the list. We haven't seen them live up to their talent level. Yes, it's the players' fault on the field, Carr and others, but it's just as much fault of the coaching as well.
I'll put it like this though, too, is to your point, this is not the offense that we expected. We knew that post Sean Payton was not going to be the same offense.
Mm-hmm.
But we figured, especially with how long Carmichael has been a part of the organization and how Carmichael has been a part of some of the best offenses in NFL history, not just New Orleans Saints history, particularly our favorite year of 2011. That was a Carmichael offense, play called offense. We figured there'd be some sprinkles of that DNA.
Mm-hmm.
We're not even seeing pixie dust levels of the offense. It is so, I don't want to say so far gone, but it's almost in like a different universe. It seems like of how far off this team is from what that offense once was. Now, if you had thrown Derek Carr in an offense that had some of those sprinkles in there, and that's what you and I had expected, and a lot of the members of the media, a lot of the fans expected, I think we're talking about a different Derek Carr. I think we're talking about this team very differently. Because even if this team was failing, but we were seeing more productive offensive numbers, it would be kind of normal. It'd be like, well, the defense didn't do enough. That would be the narrative, right? So where now it's like, well, the defense is doing something, and the offense is very much the meme of the guy with a stick poking and just saying, like, come on, like, do something. And that's just where we are with this team. I don't want to spend this whole episode on Derek Carr, but I think this needs to be said as well. I'm starting not just to lack confidence in Derek Carr, the football player. I'm starting to lack confidence in Derek Carr, the leader of the team.
Yeah.
I'm starting to lack confidence that this is a guy that the locker room can rally behind. Some of you have seen some instances of interviews, particularly Alvin Kamara, who let some things slip, or it could have just been interpreted the wrong way. Some of these guys are very active on social media. You can have your own thoughts and ideas on those as well. But the thing that I find intriguing is when I watch and listen to Kamara post game, particularly post game, I sense a guy who's pissed off and frustrated
Mm-hmm.
and just wants to win. Not a guy who's like, I don't want to be here. A guy who just wants to win and wants to win where he is. He's always given me the impression that he loves New Orleans, and if he has it his way, that he'd be a lifer with the Saints. And he was in Charlotte a few weeks ago. I think I texted you about that.
Yeah.
He was in Charlotte, and he gets thrown up on the jumbotron at a basketball game, and he gets booed, rightfully so, in Charlotte, right? And what does he do? He gets as close to the PA mic as possible because he's sitting right there and starts saying, "Who dat?" That's a guy that wants to be in New Orleans, and that's the vibe I've always got from.
I love that.
But the thing about all that is, I see a pissed off guy in Alvin Kamara, a guy who wants to get better, a guy who said essentially, "I'm sick and tired of being told that we're going to get better and not having a plan to get better." That's kind of the shade I was talking about. But I see a guy in Derek Carr in these post-game interviews, and I don't see a guy who gives a rat's ass about what the result was. And that's where my concern is, Bob. And I want to kind of open the floor for you to talk about that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of what you've seen too. Maybe more. Because I've zoomed. A lot of the locker room stuff with Derek Carr. I've seen the full extent of the interviews or the press conferences. From John Hendricks, from Ross Jackson. When I've had the ability to sit in on them myself. And I don't see a guy, everybody wants to come down on Dennis Allen because Dennis Allen has an absolute lack of self-accountability. And they're right for coming down on him for it. I've not seen until recently people coming down on Derek Carr for the same thing. But since about week 3 or 4, that's the Derek Carr that I have seen too. Myself, the one a guy that just doesn't either want to or just refuses to take any responsibility for the things that are going wrong. I have not seen a guy. Now, none of us know what kind of guy he is in the locker room, know what kind of guy he is in the huddle. So I will throw that caveat out there. But the guy that I am seeing in front of the microphones is just a guy that that lacks accountability for anything that has gone wrong with the New Orleans Saints this year. And it's what has made people sick over Dennis Allen. But like I said, I have seen the same thing from Derek Carr since very early in the season. It was a minor concern to me then, because at that point, the season really hadn't started to spiral. Well, now we're in a full tailspin, and I'm still seeing the same exact thing from Derek Carr, from Dennis Allen, really from everybody in that organization right now, and it sickens me.
I've said this about a lot of sports teams, more so teams that I have watched and been a fan of, more so than the teams that I have covered, because you have to separate. But the teams that I've rooted for over the years that are not the Saints, and you guys, most of you know that Saints fan before I started covering the team, Bob as well. And we're very fortunate for that. But I've always said the teams that I've rooted for, it's a lot easier to root for a team that I see heart and I see passion and I see a team that gives effort and loses than it is to root for a team that is mediocre or better than mediocre, that wins some games, but I don't see the hustle plays. I don't see the passion. I don't see the want to win. I mean, some of my fondest memories of some of the teams that I have watched over the years are terrible. Like, you go back and you look at the record, you go, why? Why is that the first team out of your mouth? And you said, because it wasn't about the wins and the losses, or it wasn't about the final result as much as it was that team loved playing together. Or that team gave every single ounce of blood, sweat, and tears that season. And it might have only resulted in a win percentage of like 40, but that was a lot more entertaining to watch. So that's kind of where I'm at with this team. Just covering them is it doesn't seem the number of people that really care seem to be outnumbered.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate because the people that do seem to care are the guys that were around when this team was very good. And they still see some potential for this team to be very good.
Yeah, and Brendan, you see that manifested on the field. To me, and I wrote about this too. The Atlanta Falcons, they didn't play much more crisp than the New Orleans Saints, but crisp enough. They outcoached the Saints. Again, that's something we've seen week in and week out this year. But what was most concerning to me is that they just out-physicaled the Saints on both sides of the ball. And Atlanta looked like the team that wanted to be there. New Orleans did not. And I don't blame the fans for souring on this team. When you see a product like that, I hate to bring money into it because I'm a purist at heart, and I love sports for its purity. That's why I hate Roger Goodell and his corrupt regime so much. But that's another story for another time. But when you see millionaires that don't act like they care, then why should you, someone who doesn't get paid for following the team, have any higher emotion than what those guys do? That's the perspective that I can see it from right now. And like you said, it's not everybody. We know Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill, they play their butts off. Man, you got to have the passion, or you got to love the passion that Malcolm Roach is playing with right now. Paulson Adebo, Alontae Taylor, those guys too. Brian Brzee, who's frankly in a rookie slump right now, big time in a rookie slump, but he's playing his ass off, down in and down out. Even a guy like Andrus Peat, who the fans have hated for quite some time. Andrus is hurting, physically hurting. He is just, his body is breaking down at this point in his career, yet he's dragging himself out there at an unfamiliar position, playing it reasonably well, by the way. Guys like that, they should avoid the firing squad right now. But as a whole, when you're questioning the effort or the desire of the guys that should be the stars of your team, there's clearly, as the saying goes, there's clearly something wrong in Mudville.
My last 2 points before we move on to what's next for the Saints, and then look into the Lions just a hair. What you said about millionaires not acting like they care to be there, then why should you? I'll take it a step further. And you said you hate to bring money into it, so I hate to do this too, but yeah, you don't get paid to cover or paid to follow the team if you're a fan. But dang, money's coming out of your pockets one way or another, right? Whether it's you're paying for Sunday ticket because you don't live close. Well, you guys know this as well as we do. Sunday ticket went up, I don't want to say astronomically this year, but it went up a lot, like a lot of money this year. So you guys are paying, what, $350 a year just to watch the team? And for some people, you're like, oh, that's nothing. For other people, like, that's a good chunk of change that could be used on bills, Christmas gifts right now, right? Some of you are season ticket holders. And you're not just having to pay for your season, but you're having to pay for the right to retain the rights to your seats every year. And I know that's not cheap. Or you live in New Orleans, so you get the games locally and everything's great, but you're spending money on jerseys, spending money on merch, memorabilia. You're spending money to have those tailgates with your family every week, which, don't get me wrong, it's great to have the family over and enjoy a good time. But you're spending all this money to watch a really sorry product right now. So why should you care? I mean, this is coming from the guy that's paid for season tickets for the Charlotte Hornets for 8 years. I don't know why I care either, because they suck, and that franchise is ran by a ton of idiots too. But you guys see where we understand where you are coming from.
Yeah.
A lot more than John says Saints are taking toys right out of right out from under the Christmas tree, or Will's Christmas tree. That's
There you go. Right.
That's
Let's get a
accurate.
class action lawsuit together against the New Orleans Saints.
For taking toys right out of Will's Christmas tree. Uncle Brendan will send Will some gifts as a replacement because the Saints have been doing Bobby so wrong. Oh man. So, as we close out the show, Bob, I don't want to keep people on too late tonight, but what is next for New Orleans? Because this could be we talked about last week being like a pivot point in the season, and the Saints had a really good opportunity, and well, I think that's what makes last week sting a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Is they had a really good opportunity and they squandered it. They still have a good opportunity, which is crazy.
Yeah,
it's insane to say the Saints still have a good opportunity to win the division. And I mean this because you look after the Lions and you go, okay, well, you get the Giants, the 1-10 Carolina Panthers at home. You got to play Tampa again. You don't know what you're going to get with the Rams, even with Stafford back, right? And you get the Falcons again. And you look at that and you go, this isn't like the 17, 18, 19, 20 Saints where you look at that schedule and you go, oh, breezing through it. By any means. That's not what you're saying at this point. But you look at that, and even with how bad this team is, you're like, wow. Even if the Saints go 500 there, you could still win the division. So what's next for the Saints at this point? I mean, we can continue to be Debbie Downers tonight. You could try to find a positive side to it. But the fact is they're playing a really good football team on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
A really good football team, mind you, with a lot of New Orleans Saints DNA, which I think is going to be that much more frustrating for fans if the Saints just absolutely get rocked. Because you have Campbell, former Saints coach, Aaron Glenn, former Saints coach, Alex Anzalone having a really good year. Say what you will about the kid. We all knew he could ball. It was just about whether he could stay on the field or not.
Right.
He's been healthy. He's been balling out. Gardner Johnson, he's battled his injuries, but he's a part of that makeup and that DNA, whether he's on the field or not, just the intensity that he brings as a person. Again, whether you like it or not, there's a lot of Saints DNA there.
Yep.
Can the Saints beat this team? And before we even get into that, what do you want to see out of this team moving forward? Because the Saints are a banged up team right now.
The first thing I need to see out of this team is just a little bit of fight, because we sure as hell didn't see it against Atlanta. Sure as hell didn't see it against Minnesota, a team that they should have run right out of that stadium too. So I'd like to see a little bit of fight. I expect the Detroit Lions to beat the New Orleans Saints on Sunday. The Vegas odds makers do too. The way the Saints are playing, the product that they have shown me, the lack of fight that they have shown me, I expect the Detroit Lions to win this game by 3 or 4 scores, maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns. That's just the lack of faith that I have in Dennis Allen, Derek Carr, and this whole group right now. And then you sprinkle in the mountain of injuries that the Saints are dealing with, and the fact that the Detroit Lions are going to have 4 days of extra rest due to playing on Thanksgiving themselves. The Lions are eyeing up a division title, and they're hungry for it. The Saints had the division title in the palm of their hands last week. They wouldn't have clinched it if they beat Atlanta, but they would have had a nice little cushion. Now, New Orleans is staring at a scenario where if you lose to Detroit this weekend, you are now playing catch up to the extent of you need to string a few wins together, something we've not seen Dennis Allen teams do, by the way, string a couple wins together. You need to string a couple of wins together and hope for losses from both Tampa Bay and Atlanta. Now, as bad as those two teams are, you might get it, but this is the same exact scenario that we've seen play out in 2022, in 2021. The Saints need to win, but also need this team to lose and that team to beat this team. That's not the position you want to be in as you go into December. Yet here we are again. And it's all the New Orleans Saints' fault. All of it. All of it. You can't blame Goodell. You can't blame the refs. You can't blame injuries. This has been a very healthy team, actually, right up until last week. And you've had numerous opportunities to take control of this NFC South division, if not position yourself for a top seed in the conference, and you have not done any of it. So I need to see a little bit of fight from this team. If they walk out of here, I'll use last month's loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Saints were getting run out of that building, their own building, again in the first half. But this team showed me a lot of fight in the second half, and made a game out of it, and frankly should have tied it in the final minutes. And you and I came out of that game thinking this could actually be a turning point for this team. And they did win a couple games in a row, and then revert right back to the Dennis Allen Saints that we've grown to know and hate. I'm not going to go as far as say the Saints need to win this game, because I've just painted the scenario where I don't know who Atlanta plays this week, but I know Tampa Bay plays Carolina. So, if you lose to Detroit, Tampa Bay wins. You're not tied with them, but you're a game back because of a tiebreaker. And you now fall 2 games behind the Atlanta Falcons, plus you're losing a head-to-head tiebreaker. You're in bad shape. So at this point, I'd say you ignore the standings, and you just go out and fight the Detroit Lions, because Dan Campbell's squad is going to come to this town looking for a fight. You need to give it right back to them. And if you lose closely, I think the realistic fans can take that and at least get a little bit of positive out of it. And like you said, you got the Giants, Panthers, Rams, down the stretch, mixed in with the Buccaneers and Falcons. So maybe you can put something together. But if this team gets run out of their own building, the Saints do, like I expect they will, I could see this season absolutely imploding after that.
Atlanta has the Jets in New York, to answer your question. So, yeah, not looking good for the Saints right now. I think what's next is not to completely piggyback off of Bob, but you got to kind of see where this team is mentally, right? Like if you come out and you just are lackadaisical and you just walk through it and you get your butt handed to you, inside the Superdome, I know where this team is. And it's not going to be a team that's competing for anything. But if this team comes out and they play well, whether it be win or lose, and it's close, you have a little bit more faith that even at 2 games under 500, that or 2 games behind the NFC South lead, or a game, however the math ends up working out, you're like, okay, maybe this could be a team that turns it around. But how many times have we seen that this year, where the Saints have a good outing and you're like, oh, this is it, they figured it out, and then it's right? Like New England. I know New England's not a good team, but to go up to New England and shut them out, you're like, okay, we got something here.
Mm-hmm.
Indianapolis, okay, we got something here. The Bears game, not the greatest showing scoreboard-wise, but again, you're like, okay, maybe we got something here. And then it just doesn't materialize. So you got to have realistic optimism. And I know that's really hard because there isn't a lot of realistic optimism with this team right now. But we'll see. I think what's next is, I guess the easiest way to say this is, what's next is you're going to really find out whether this team is going to be drafting top 10.
Yeah.
Or whether they're going to make a push to win the NFC South next week. Or this Sunday. That's what you're going to find out on Sunday. That's what's next for the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to be a team that, they might be picking top 8 if they lose and just crap the bed? Or is it going to be a team that somehow is going to find themselves, very similar to the last 2 seasons, competing for the NFC South title the last week of the season? That's what you're going to find out. regardless of the score,
Right.
there's a fight, it's going to go one way. If there's no fight at all, it's going to go the other.
Do you see the Saints giving the Lions a fight? Yeah, forget about the scoreboard for a minute. Yeah, we know the W is important, but I've watched a lot of Detroit Lions football this year. I know you have too. Based off what you've seen and based off what you've seen from the New Orleans Saints, can you see the New Orleans Saints giving the Detroit Lions a legitimate fight to the finish this week?
No. I mean, Detroit's defense, they're athletic, they're quick, and very much like Dan Campbell, they're hungry every week. They're going to kick your butt. Try to, at least. They might not be the best defense in the league.
Yeah, they give up a lot of yards, but like you said, they'll fight you from whistle to whistle.
Yeah, and they're fun to watch. I don't care if you give like I was saying earlier. I don't care if you give up a ton of yards. I don't care if you're the best team in the league or the best defense. If you're entertaining and you give me effort, that's all I care about. They're fun to watch. The tape might not be there, like you said. They're not one of the best defenses, but they're going to hit you in the mouth for 4 quarters, whether they give up 400 yards or not. Offensively, the Saints are really going to struggle where? They're going to really struggle outside of the tackles because they got weapons, right? Gibbs, their first-round pick, there was a lot of flack that they were getting for not using him right at the beginning of the year. They figured that joint out pretty dang quick. And they're going to really struggle to contain, right? The other thing there is, Jared Goff, towards the end of his time with the Rams, I don't know why he got so much flack. Honestly, like I thought he was a good quarterback. I guess the Lions didn't need him to be a great quarterback. They need a good quarterback. He's had a really good year. He's smart. He's a former Pro Bowler himself, and he's got weapons.
Yep. And I got bad news for you Saints fans. Even when Goff was struggling in Los Angeles, every time, and I mean every time, he faced the Saints, he put up numbers. He torched that defense, that Dennis Allen defense. So there's that.
I just don't see a scenario where the Saints keep it within like 10, right? I wanted to say one score, but like even more so, like I see this being a game that Detroit wins comfortably. And I don't see another way out of it. And it's sad to say that.
Do you remember that Thanksgiving? We, sadly we covered it. Remember that Thanksgiving game 2 or 3 years ago against Buffalo in the Dome, where you just knew going in, you had a feeling the Buffalo was going to just blow them out. And that's exactly what happened. The Saints kept the game it's close on the scoreboard, for about a quarter and a half, and then just things got out of hand quick. That's exactly the way I see this game unfolding on Sunday.
I don't even know if they keep it close.
Right, I'm being generous.
That doesn't mean that the Lions are going to come out and just put up 20 points in the first quarter. But this is not a Saints team that showed me they can score points at all. So
right. And again, I'm going to throw out the ugly first half stats of this defense now the last 6 games. Average of almost 19 points, 235 yards, and 58% third down conversions. That's just in the first half alone. You come out like that against the Detroit Lions, and those were numbers against teams like Chicago, Minnesota, Atlanta. You come out like that against Detroit, you're going to be behind 38-0 at halftime.
Yeah, I don't see this being pretty for New Orleans at all. Bob, let's close it up here. Ultimately, we both don't think this is going to go well for New Orleans. We'll have a little bit of a pregame on Sunday right here.
Yeah.
So you guys will see us right back here with all of that. And Bob, until then, you got articles to get written, whether they're happy or sad. To quote Jason Kidd and what he said in his press conference with the Mavericks is be positive. I think he said something like he was yelling. I don't know if you saw it. He was like yelling at a journalist, like, "How about you write something effing positive?" So come on, Bob, write something positive. I'm just kidding. But
Look, I'm doing my best. I am doing my best.
where can people read those really positive articles right now?
Folks, check me out on Facebook, Bob Rose, ROSE, Twitter at BobbyR2613. I post all of my articles along with links to our shows on my personal pages, but you can also check us all out at the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, or the SI.com team page for your New Orleans Saints. And don't forget to keep beefing up your Bayou Blitz groups. The Bayou Blitz Facebook page, and the Bayou Blitz Twitter page at Bayou Blitz Pod. I know a lot of you watching this show tonight are already members of it. But this time of year, if you're talking to New Orleans Saints fans, family, friends, acquaintances, and they're wondering where to get the inside news or more more analytical pieces, steer them the direction of your group, because the Bayou Blitz Twitter page, Bayou Blitz Facebook page, those are your groups, and you all have done a fantastic job. Win, lose, or draw by the Saints, you guys have still done a fantastic job, of helping us and supporting us in those groups. Now that we ask you, just help us promote it a little bit. Help make your group a more national and a more prominent power.
Absolutely. For myself, you can follow me Twitter, Instagram, just about everything at BT Boylan. Follow us on Twitter at Bayou Blitz Pod. Join that Bayou Blitz Facebook group. I'm actually going to check it out right now while we're talking, because I'm curious what the number is in terms of members. So if my internet wants to work, we're at 1.9. So last time I threw out that number, it was 1.8. So you guys have done a good job. We really want to get to 2 by the end of the Saints season. It's a lot easier to bring people to the group when the Saints are winning. So we really need you guys to churn out some of that extra work. Get us at 2,000 members of the Bayou Blitz Facebook group. All the Saints News Network articles are in there, along with this show and many other outlets of Saints media. So go ahead and join if you haven't. And if you have, go ahead, like Bob said, let your friends, let your family know where to get what I like to think is your most in-depth coverage, like a lot of you say, and I appreciate these comments, and I know Bob does as well, when we hear things like some of the most real, some of the most open, some of the most honest in Saints media, because at the end of the day, we don't want to be talking heads. I've never wanted to be that. Bob said this before, we want to be your voice and whatnot, but at the same time, like, it's fun for us because we were fans of the team before we started covering the team. So in a way, I like to think we know exactly where you are, because we're not just collecting paychecks because we've covered this team because it's just the team we happen to cover. Like, we know, we've been there.
I feel like I'm less of a fan this year, but yeah, go on.
It's been hard to be a fan this year. Let's be honest. It really has. It's been a hard year to cover, because it's been a really disappointing year. But you guys have failed. You guys have failed to disappoint us to this point. You guys have been fantastic. We're really appreciative of you guys. Really enjoy coming in and seeing familiar faces. Brian Russell, we see you almost every week. John Butler, you're here. Anna, you came in a little late today, but we still love you anyway. You're here every week. Eric, we love you so much. We're sending you merch, right? So, we appreciate all of you guys for tuning in week in and week out. And we can't wait to continue to give you guys more coverage. Like I said, we will be here Sunday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, giving you guys a pregame show. I don't know about a post-game show. It might be too much of a bloodbath for that. But regardless, we'll be here on Sunday hanging out with you guys. We can't wait for that. In the meantime, make sure you follow Bob and John and Ross and Kyle over the Saints News Network. Catch up on their great work. And until Sunday, find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. Stop eating your Thanksgiving leftovers. It has been a week. throw them out. And we'll see you guys on Sunday. Who dat?
Who dat?